Welcome to Let the Quran Speak. The Chinese government has been persecuting the Uyghur community for quite some time now, and it has intensified in the last few years. Western governments are beginning to take notice. Canada recently voted to allow up to 10,000 Uyghur members of the community into Canada. And with me today is Mehmet Tohti. Mehmet, welcome to Let the Quran Speak.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You have been advocating on behalf of the Uyghur community for quite many years, I believe 10 years or maybe more than that. Mehmet, how do you feel about this recent announcement by the Canadian government that it will allow 10,000 Uyghur members of the community into Canada to be resettled? I know that you also participated in getting parliamentarians to vote to recognize what was happening in China as a genocide. And now this is a second step, right? So how do you feel about this accomplishment?
It was a historic moment on February 1st. And for the first time, the cabinet members, including the prime minister, voted something related to Uyghurs. So it was historic. And for Uyghur communities who are facing transnational oppression around the world, for them, it is a sign of hope. And there is a reason to be hopeful, to be optimistic. And for that reason, it is important. And most importantly, it is also something for Canada because we are the signatory party for Genocide Convention. Mm-hmm. And a part of the Genocide Convention is about the state's responsibility. Mm-hmm. State's responsibility is originally in the original document of Geneva Convention, it was focused on two areas. One is the prevention of genocide, and secondly, punishment of perpetrators. Mm-hmm. And since 2006, the government of Canada they worked quite hard to incorporate one component into Genocide Convention, which is responsibility to protection doctrine. Mm-hmm. Now it's part of Rome Statute. At the same time, it is part of the state responsibility. What does it mean? And when genocide is taking place, or when there's a serious risk for genocide to take place, the state parties for Genocide Convention, they have three obligations. One is prevent the genocide from further expansion, mm-hmm. With more calamity, and secondly, prosecute those who perpetrated these heinous crimes. And the third, when the host country does not provide any protection, then the state parties, they have a responsibility to offer protection for those victims. Mm-hmm. And for that reason, it is important for Canada as well. And as you mentioned, on February 21st, 2021, our House of Commons voted unanimously and acknowledged that what is happening for Uyghurs is genocide. Mm-hmm. But government did not acknowledge. Mm-hmm. With this motion, if you look at the preamble of the motion, M62, it was about genocide. It was about crime against humanity that is happening right now. So government, by voting, all cabinet members, for that motion, actually indirectly acknowledged the genocide, mm-hmm. Uyghur genocide. Mm-hmm. And with that acknowledgement, and they made the first step to uphold it is legally binding international obligation, the responsibility to protection doctrine.
Mm-hmm. So I guess this motion is part of that, right?
Yes.
To be able to help some people, some of the Uyghurs who are outside of China. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about that, Mehmet? Why the motion targets Uyghurs who are not in China, but are outside in third countries?
Because of the Chinese restrictions, the Canada or other Western democracies cannot do anything with the Uyghur communities inside China. And China does not give access, and China does not give that kind of opportunity for other countries to intervene or help those vulnerable communities. And secondly, it is a well-documented reality that Chinese government has extended its repression beyond its jurisdiction. And so Uyghurs hunted down from countries like Pakistan, or Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, even Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates, and Egypt, and repatriated back to China. And those Uyghurs simply disappeared. And nearly 25 Uyghur students from Al-Azhar University deported back to China in 2014. All of them disappeared. And a number of Uyghurs from Pakistan and the United Arab Emirates and the Saudi Arabia. And those countries also worked quite well with the Chinese government and compromised. Instead of providing safety and security or sanctuary for those Uyghur refugees fled from genocide, and they compromised China. And so those Uyghurs ended up in concentration camps or some other places. And for that reason, Canada notes that. And also when Canada does not have access to China to offer help to the direct victim of the genocide, and so decided to extend that helping hand for those who escaped from genocide and unsafe in third countries. So this is also a positive step for the right direction.
Mehmet, can you tell me about the challenges of this program? Because there are people in all sorts of different countries, right, with all sorts of different papers. So Canada is going to have to negotiate with all those countries. How do you think it's going to work logistically?
I think when political will is
when there's
shown,
a will, there's a way.
Yeah, and this is not the Canada has a quite a full experience on this and a full database and a lot of tools in their toolbox to handle with countries when they're helping to Uyghur refugees. So I think there is a possibility, and a great possibility actually, and the most importantly, for it is the interest of those countries as well, and there are a lot of international condemnation and a lot of criticism about those countries' cooperation with China when genocide is taking place. And for that reason, yes, there are some challenges, and China can increase pressure on those countries to prevent for those Uyghur refugees from exiting those countries. And China can do that. China has economic power and a political power, and they can intervene, and they can offer some incentives for those countries to work with China. But at the same time, and Canada and some other Western democracies also, they have some leverage on those countries. So because number is not that big, and the Uyghurs are not in single countries and the single cities, they're scattered in a number of the countries in Middle East or Central Asia. And for that reason, I think it is doable, and with the cooperation of other countries. And plus, those people do not have any threat for that society. They are peaceful, and they are just working, or they are trying to establish their families again with their children. And for that reason, from the humanitarian base or from the situation ongoing in China, unfolding in China, it is the interest of all countries just cooperate with Canada and provide safe exit for those Uyghur refugees. And I think diplomatic engagement has already started.
Why now, Mehmet? Because this has been going on, and people have been aware of it, I believe, since 2018. The camps that China created and we're sending the Uyghur community to. And it has taken Western governments so long to recognize that this is happening and then to do something about it. Why do you think now, in the last couple of years, they have taken action?
And it was difficult to convince them because China did not cooperate. China blocked all the information, and many Western governments, they couldn't get the official verification about the situation of Uyghurs on the ground. And however, with the help of technologies, for example, satellite images and a lot of internal Chinese documents started to emerge. And that became a crucial tool for Western the leaders to think about. And that provided the first-hand evidence as well. And if you look at the satellite images, and all facilities that China presented as a school, you see the barbed wires and the watchtowers, and it is being expanded. And when you listen, the witnesses escaped from those camps, and you hear totally different stories, and you hear the atrocity crimes taking place in this area. And so this is one side of the story, why it took so long, and just because of the restriction to access the exact information. And secondly, almighty dollars and the power of China. And in many countries, they would like to have a business relationship with China. They don't want to upset China and in fear that their economic or other interests will get hurt. And so China used that effectively against many countries. So this is another reason. But however, with the parliamentary recognition, or the parliamentary committees studied this before the parliamentary recognition, so they collected the very credible evidence about genocide, and also they offered some sort of recommendations to the Canadian government to act. For example, a Human Rights Subcommittee, Standing Committee of Foreign Affairs. But when things started to turn around was the last year, April. And April 6, 2022, the Standing Committee of Immigration and Citizenship Canada in our parliament, they passed one motion. And they offered a special immigration measures for Ukrainians. And they fled from war, and we have to help them. But at the same time, war and the genocide are the same atrocity crimes in nature. And so we started to make noise, and if you give a special immigration measures for the people escaped from war, why you don't do the same for those people escaped from genocide? That was my main campaign argument, and I reached out to all members of the committee, and it was a double standard. To my the best knowledge, it was a double standard, and it was not the way we do things in Canada. And so when for one community we waive all the visa requirement, and if you look at the real situation, yes, Ukrainians and they escaped from war, we have to help, but those escaped from war, they are in already Western democracies in Europe. They do not face transnational repression from Russia. But Uyghurs who escaped from genocide, they are still under pressure. They are still facing transnational repression, deportation, and all kind of repression by Chinese government by holding their family members as a hostage. So you cannot compare the severity of those two situations. And so when I made that argument and I tried to convince the members of the committee, and on April 26th, they passed a similar motion. Whatever we afforded to Ukrainians as a special immigration measure, we have to apply the same measures to Uyghurs. And that was the turning point. After that motion passed unanimously on April 26, 2022, and we worked to convince MPs to table another motion or pass legislation. And I was advised that if we table a legislation, it takes more than 2 years. So those people cannot wait for 2 years. And so we preferred to table a motion. So Samir Zubairi from ruling party, I extend my appreciation for
he's done so much, yes,
for him, and he worked and he built a cross-party support on this, and he tabled that motion M62 on June 21st, 2022. That was the International Refugee Day. And so since then, we worked, and there was a first round of discussion on October 26, 2022. There was a unanimous support, and the January 30th, 2023, and positive responses from all the MPs from all different political parties. So February 1st, unanimous vote. 3,022 against 0. It took nearly years and a half to build that consensus, but it was a strong message, not only for China. At the same time, a strong message for Uyghur communities to be hopeful, and also other Western democracies to follow suit. And so it was a good day at the end, but it took a long time to come to this point.
And I'm so impressed that you stayed the course, right? Because you could have given up, and you didn't have. I noticed with the Uyghur representatives, they didn't have a lot of resources, but they did what they could with whatever they had. So Mehmet, I want to ask you, as this program develops, right, what's the next step? After Canada agrees to bring in these the Uyghur members of the Uyghur community, and the process starts, and what are you doing next? Like, what about especially Uyghurs who are living in China? Are you working towards helping them in some way? I know that's a more difficult challenge.
Yeah, it is a difficult challenge because we know the China and a big economic power and a military power, and it is not only a challenge for Uyghurs and the Tibetans and the other the groups. At the same time, it is a challenge for our democracy, freedom, and the many values we represent, and including the Islamic values. And so not only the Uyghur communities alone, and in many Western democracies also, they're scratching their head how to handle this issue. And so at this point, as victim communities and who have very rich experience under the hand of the Chinese rule, and we provide some recommendations and suggestions to develop a policy option to handle it. This is one of our mission. And secondly, we engage with party leaders and high-level government officials. For example, for this program, I met with the Minister of Immigration, Sean Fraser, more than 4 times. And I met with the Prime Minister twice. And I mentioned, so this is a part of the big picture, if you look at the whole situation, not only for saving Uyghurs, at the same time, kind of dealing with the Chinese repression. And within this whole picture, how we can advance our cause and how we can offer some sort of protection for our people. Of course, we have to go through a lot of international challenges at the UN level and multilateral organizations, and that China has a strong influence in those institutions, just like different committees or councils of United Nations, just like Human Rights Council, or China has a veto power. At the same time, China has a strong representation in the World the Labor Organization that deals with the forced labor, for example. And China is not a party state to many international institutions, just like ICC, International Criminal Court, or ICJ, International Court of Justice. So how we can use our available legal option and venues to stop this Chinese madness of persecuting Uyghurs. This is one mission. And secondly, how we can work with the Western governments and international institutions to increase pressure and put some sanctions and show some consequence for those perpetrators. So it is beyond the capacity of our small communities in Canada, and we try to make it happen. And I am pleased to see that some of our recommendations and start to be implemented or incorporated to government policy. And if you look at the recent Indo-Pacific strategy of Canada, there are twice mentioned about the Uyghur situation in that big document, strategic document of Canada, and dealing with the Indo-Pacific. Twice they mentioned the situation of Uyghurs. So it is for us, just like 2,500 maximum, the populations, a very small community like us, it is a huge achievement. And it is also the recognition of the severity of Uyghur issues, and also the implication of Uyghur issues in the global stage. And so I think we are on the right track, and we have a solid support base in Parliament, and we are expanding that within all political parties, and we are expanding it through other Western democracies by using the precedent that Canada established. So it is a slow process, and because China is China, as we know, but we are hopeful.
Mehmet, can you tell us a little bit about the Uyghur community in Canada, how they're doing, how they're thriving, and how are they developing as a community?
Our community is quite resilient community, and one thing the Chinese government is misjudging our community is, for example, we embraced Islam more than 1,000 years ago. And so Islam is our core identity. As a Uyghur, we have two identity. One is our national identity, came from history with our unique culture and other characteristics. And most importantly, Islam, our religion, is our core identity. And so we do not compromise our core identity. And we do everything possible to keep it, at the same time pass to next generation. And in that regard, even we are a small community, like 2,500 people all across Canada.
Wow, that's a very small
and
community.
We have one, we purchased one 145 years old church nearby Hamilton, and we converted into Uyghur mosque without any debt. And we don't pay mortgage. And also we have one in Ottawa, Uyghur Mosque and Cultural Center without any debt. And we are establishing schools in all the cities, wherever Uyghur community exists, small or big. And we are trying to pass our culture and the language, because Uyghur language is a very important language. And it is the forefather or original language of all Turkic people around the world. And for that reason, it is important to keep that language and keep that culture alive with our Islamic identity and pass it to our next generation. In order to do that, you have to institutionalize your community with certain establishment. And we have to leave a legacy to our next generation, because our generation is so crucial. Because Chinese government effectively eliminated all scholars, religious scholars and intellectuals, and they put them in the concentration camps and sentenced for life or long-term imprisonment, and put our younger generation into Chinese kids' concentration camps or state-sanctioned orphanages, just to assimilate. And there are some, the population in the middle, and they put them in forced labor. And so this generation is the last generation. And if we fail to pass our culture, language, and the national identity to second generation or next generation, Chinese strategy will win. And so we don't want to see that to happen. And for that reason, as a resilient community, we mobilize whatever we have beyond our capacity to establish, build that institution to keep our culture and identity, national and the religious identity, alive in Canada.
Mehmet, I'm really impressed and moved by what you're doing and what you said and everything that you're doing for the cause of the Uyghur people. And I support you, and I wish you all the best, and I pray for your success.
Thank you. Just keep us in your prayer.
We will.
Support us today and help us share the message of Islam with people across the globe. Thank you, and may God bless you and your loved ones with the very best always.